14.40 and negative exponents. In this section, we're going to talk about the zero exponent property and the negative exponent property. In the zero exponent property, it says that the base to a zero power is going to always be 1. So a to the zero power is 1, and that means that 4 to the zero power is also 1. Now, the negative exponent property says that if you have a base to the negative exponent, it actually is a fraction where the base and the exponent are on the bottom. So a to the negative n is the same thing as 1 over a to the n. So 4 to the negative 2 is the same thing as 1 over 4 squared. Okay, a again cannot be 0 though in both of these properties. All right, so time for you to write to those two properties in your notes. And now let's do some practicing. So here we are told to evaluate the expressions. So since we are evaluating these expressions, we're going to first write it as a power, and then we will multiply it out so we get a nice answer. Okay, so for this first one, we look here and we see that it says 3 to the negative 4 power. Well, we know that's the same as 1 over 3 to the 4th power, right? But what is 3 to the 4th power? That's the same thing as 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, which is the same thing as 1 over 81. Okay, same thing with this one. Well, we have 6 to the 8th power. We know that's like this, right? 6 to the 8th power. And over here, we're multiplying it then times 6 to the 8th power. So what do we end up with? 6 to the 8th on top, 6 to the 8th on bottom. So we end up with 1. The other way to look at this one as well is to say that this is also the product of powers property, right? So we could say that 6 to the negative 8 times 6 to the 8th is the same thing as adding these two exponents, right? So 6 to the negative 8 plus 8 is the same thing as 6 to the 0 power, and we know anything to the 0 power is 1. Okay, both those ways work. All right, now let's simplify these expressions. Over here we have negative 5 times x to the 0 power. But what's x to the 0 power? That's the same thing as 1. So our answer is negative 5. Okay, over here we have 4n to the 4th times n to the negative 7th over 6. Well, this top part here, we could simplify it down by adding those two exponents, right? Because that's product of a power property. So 4 minus 7 is the same thing as n to the negative 3. Okay, so we're left with that, but we know n to the negative 3 is the same thing as this, and the negative n to the 3rd power on the bottom. 6 is still on the bottom, so that is our answer. All right, time for you to do just 4 practice problems this time. Okay, a couple hints on these practice problems. Not that you'll need it, but just in case you do. Over here, we have negative 2 as our base, right? And we know it's to the negative 5th power. That means we know it's going to be a fraction. We know negative 2 is going to be the base, but what goes here? Okay. Same thing with this one here. We can also rewrite this as 1 times 1 on top, 5 to the 7th times 5 to the negative 4th on bottom. But what does our product of powers property tell us? We can add these two. So this ends up being 1 over 5 to the 3rd, right? I guess I just did that one for you. On this one, you just need to look at well, there's 2 ways you can do this one. You can simplify this out right away, or you can do your product of powers property. Either way works, but you should end up with something under the 1, right? Something down here. What is that? Okay, on this one here, we know 8 has to stay on top. Something goes to the bottom. It's x, but what power is it? All right, and that is it for 14.4.